Suez Canal some years ago, over 18,000 ships a year passed through the land of Egypt. A German merchantman with coffee from Kenya. An Italian liner sailing eastward for Australia. An American oil tanker from the Persian Gulf, bound for a refinery near London. For ships from every seafaring nation of the world, this used to be a regular journey, passing through perhaps the most important 100 miles of water in the world, the Suez Canal. Cutting through the desert sands of the Isthmus of Suez, the canal separates the continent of Asia on one side from Africa on the other. Connecting the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, the Suez Canal enabled ships to sail directly from Europe to the Far East. Oil from Iraq, Iran, and Kuwait on the Persian Gulf was the most important commodity to be shipped through the canal. With Suez closed, ships now have to make a long and expensive 12,000-mile journey around Africa. Formerly, tankers in a steady flow carried 2/3 of the oil which Europe needs from the rich fields of the Middle East. Suez was virtually Europe's lifeline to the oil without which the economy would collapse. Besides oil, ships carried such raw materials from the east as tin from the mines of Malaya, rubber from the plantations of Southeast Asia, wool from the great sheep stations of Australia, tea from the hills of East Africa. From the factories of Europe to the countries of the East flowed the manufactured goods produced only by a modern industrial nation. Cars and parts from the assembly lines of Britain, textiles from England and France, manufactured goods of every kind made in Europe were shipped via Suez to the countries of the East. This waterway is now closed, but the result has not proved disastrous to the economy of the Western world. The history of the canal dates back to the time of the Pharaohs of Egypt, who 3,000 years earlier built the first water link between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. But it was suitable only for small ships, and in time the desert sands filled it in. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European merchant fleets began to open up trade with India and China and established colonies in the east. But the journey round the southern tip of Africa, through the stormy seas of Cape Horn, was not only long and expensive, but dangerous as well. The need for a shorter, safer route became more and more. Napoleon Bonaparte made the first attempt to build a canal. He failed, as many of the best engineers of the time said he would. After many attempts, it remained for Ferdinand de Lesseps. For 10 long, heartbreaking years, de Lesseps fought sand and wind and people who said it could not hold back the sands, they said. The Mediterranean and the Red Sea are at different levels. But in 1869, the waters of the Red Sea and the Mediterranean were at last joined. With one of the most magnificent ceremonies in history, the canal became a reality, and for nearly 100 years the French company which de Lesseps founded operated it. Now the canal is under the control of the Egyptian government. Every ship had to have an experienced Suez pilot aboard. Let us look back and follow the route. A ship entered the canal at Port Tewfik. In the course of its 12-hour journey, it passed through the Bitter Lake and Lake Timsah, formed by natural depressions in the land. At the Mediterranean end is the largest city on the canal, Port Said. In contrast to the Panama Canal, there are no locks to negotiate on the Suez. Captain Metawali, a pilot, well knows the potential dangers of the 100-mile journey. A sudden wind might blow the ship dangerously near the banks, or a sandstorm obliterate everything from sight. Most to be feared was a failure of the steering mechanism, subjected to great strain maneuvering in these shallow waters. At one time, arid desert was the only landscape visible. But today, much of the land on the African side is green, with cultivated fields of beans and wheat, made possible by irrigation. The Suez Canal is essentially a ditch dug through desert sands. As the sands were a problem when the canal was built, so are they still today. For when the propeller of a large ship turns, it churns the water into powerful whirlpools that contort and destroy the bottom of the canal and drag sand from under the banks, filling the main channel. Dredgers worked day and night in the endless battle against the sand, sucking it out of the canal and throwing it back over the desert. For the entire length of the canal, the banks are built of stone, and constant repair and reconstruction are necessary. But there is also the work of deepening and widening to allow larger ships to pass through. The stopping distance of a ship may be as much as 2 miles, so its passage was plotted in the Canal Authority headquarters at Ismailia. When a ship broke down, warning was sent immediately to all others to avoid risk of collision, and tugs dispatched to tow the crippled vessel clear of the canal. When this ship, the Reza Pahlavi, reached the Bitter Lake, she passed a convoy of ships lying at anchor, waiting to proceed in the opposite direction, for as yet it is not possible for ships to pass one another in the canal. During the passage, work went on as usual for the crew. After 12 hours, the journey was over, and the ship lay at anchor in Port Said, ready to break out into the Mediterranean. For the Canal Authority, the responsibility of keeping this vital shipping lane open was great, involving much work behind the scenes. In research laboratories, engineers studied problems relating to canal construction. They searched for ways and means to make improvements and speed the transit of the ever-increasing volume of shipping. There is a repair yard which can handle emergency repairs on the largest ships using the canal. The Canal Authority has its own fleet of 400 vessels, ranging from launches and tugs to dredgers, floating cranes, and a huge floating dock. For centuries, the world depended upon the Bedouins of the desert for transportation between east and west. This ancient part of the world has been torn with strife and bitter wars in recent years. Progress has been delayed. There has been much fighting. The world has watched events closely and anxiously, waiting to see this vital link between east and west, the Suez Canal, open again.